Shalom Aleichem, good evening my friends. We're continuing learning the Chatzar Yosef. It's been a couple of weeks, but we're back in action because the time calls for it. We're in chapter 14, we're starting a very interesting and important story, as usual, breaking down the depths, asking good questions, and hopefully coming to deeper truths in our wonderful Torah. Let's read the story one more time to refresh our memories. We're on page 205, chapter 14. The Gemara says over there, Masechet Gittin, I'll read it to you in English, Rav Manyumi bar Chilkiya, Rav Chilkiya bar Tuvia, and Rav Huna bar Chia, these three Chachamim, were once sitting together. They said, if there is someone who has heard something about a certain place called Kfar Sechania of Egypt, Kfar means a village, so a certain village with the name of Sechania in Egypt where Jews lived there. If anyone heard anything about this place, let him relate it. Start talking about it. So the first one opened up and started speaking about it. This is the first section of this chapter. We're going to only focus on that first story about that city. But the future chapters will speak more about this city. So the first story is the following from this city. One of them opened up and said, there was an incident involving an engaged man and woman. A young man and woman, couple, are supposed to get married. They were engaged, which means they already did the first step of halachic marriage, which is kiddushin. They just didn't do the next step, which is nisu'in, which is what allows him to live with her. They were from that city, and they were taken captive by goyim, by Gentiles. And then the goyim later married them off to each other. That's what they used to do. They used to take captives. They say, okay, you and you, go in the room, make us more captives. Make us more babies. Why? Because one of the Chachamim explained last week that the more babies they have, the higher their ransom money goes. It's a Jew at the end of the day. Right? They have another Jew to sell off, to get paid for by the city. So the woman said to the man, once they're engaged, and now they're captives, and now they're in a room. She says to him, please do not touch me, as I do not have a ketubah from you. Ketubah is the legal document, halachic legal document, explaining all the details of what the husband owes to the woman, what the woman owes to the husband. Mostly it's what the husband owes to the woman, That's what it talks about over there. And the halakha is that a man is not allowed to live with the woman, with marital relations, until he has this ketubah drafted. And it's protection for the woman, right? If he ever leaves her, divorces her, if he ever dies, she gets a guaranteed payment from the estate, which is very important in their times for women. Very important. Otherwise, they're left with nothing. Okay? Their security, along with other things detailed in the ketubah. So she says to him, since we didn't get a chance to write one, don't touch me. And he did not touch her until the day of his death. He died in captivity. Didn't touch her. And when he died, she said to them, eulogize this man who did something called pitpet. That's the Hebrew word. Pitpet. Peitet. Translation, chattered with his yetzer, his evil inclination. And he did it even more than Yosef, she says. Which Yosef is she referring to? The Yosef HaTzadik, the son of Yaakov, from the Torah himself. She says, this man was better than Yosef. Since in the case of Yosef, it was only one time. She's referencing Yosef HaTzadik's test with the wife of Potiphar, who lusted him very much, and she tried to seduce him, right? And she came very close. Right? Very famous story in the Torah. Please do your research. It's in there. It's in Parashat Vayeshev, I believe. Yes. So she says that with Yosef, it was only one time. Whereas this man, he struggled with his passion each and every day. Additionally, in the case of Yosef, he was not in one bed with Potiphar's wife. Whereas this man was in the same bed with me. Also, in the case of Yosef, Potiphar's wife was not his wife. She was forbidden to him. Whereas this man, it was I, and I was his wife. Technically, the first step of marriage was completed. That is her claim. Now we went into a very long question stance over here in the last video. Please look over there, because we went into a lot of deep questions. Just to give you a whole gist of it, I don't want to just go through them again now and waste time. But we basically asked, how does this woman have the nerve to say that attests that this guy, we don't even know his name, guy from Kraskhania, listen, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. He went through some tough times. He died in captivity. But to claim that he had a harder test than one of the pillars of the Jewish nation, one of the pillars, Yosef Tzaddik, whose name is written and inscribed forever and ever in every holy book of Sefer Torah, and we learn every single year, and there's commentaries upon libraries talking about what he went through and how he overcame and what significance of what he did. How does she have the nerve to say that he was better than Yosef?
There's no need to make the comparison.
But she made the comparison. And she went through proofs. Oh, Yosef, it was only one day. It was only one time. He was never in the same bed with her. Those things also didn't seem right. We went through proofs in the Gemara, Masechet Sotah, Masechet Yomah, which seems to say, those two Gemaras explain Yosef's test over there. It says over there that Potiphar's wife, she used to dress different clothing morning and night. Every single day try to seduce him. That sounds like every single day. Masechet Sotah says that Yosef emitted seed when they were private, in a private room. They emitted seed from his nails because he was so aroused. You tell me that's not equivalent to being in the same bed with her? They were private in a room and they were about to do it? That's not close enough to being in the same bed? I don't get it. You guys were arguing the opposite. I think it's the same.
When someone's wife is nidah, they can be in the same room. They can't be in the same bed.
That's different. Because with a nidah, when his wife is a nidah, the concept halachically is bread in the basket. That's what it's called. It's called pat besalo. That means when a person has bread in the basket, he can wait a little bit and eat it later. He knows he's going to be able to have his wife later.
Right. So I'm saying,
yes.
When someone is in nidah, why is it that you're not allowed to be in the same bed as her, but you can be in the same room as her? Because the bed is more severe.
Yeah, but again, you can't compare nidah over here.
I'm not comparing.
Because over there,
nidah. I'm just comparing why a bed.
Nidah is a special situation.
I'm comparing why a bed is stronger.
Okay, let me put you in another example. You can't compare it to nidah because a woman, let's say a husband's wife is nidah, he's allowed to be in a private room with her. But a woman who is not his wife, he's not allowed to be in a private room with her.
Okay.
Why?
A morsel can't be in a private. Even if there's someone there, can they sit on the same bed together?
Say again?
If a man is in the room with another woman.
Private room with another woman, which is asur.
Asur, but there's a witness, there's a guy there. There's another guy there. So now they're allowed to be there.
It depends who that guy is. It depends who that guy is.
Can they both sit on the same bed?
Who?
This man and the woman.
No, they're not supposed to sit on the same bed.
Why? Why they're not in the same room? They can't sit on the same bed.
Whose bed is it? Is it her bed?
Whatever bed it is.
It makes a difference.
You're not supposed to sit in the same cushion, even.
Okay, no. Why? Because the bed is stronger. The cushion is stronger than just a room.
Okay, but it's different than just being in the same room versus being in the same room where both of you are engaged and you know what you're about to do. Because that's what happened in the story.
Okay, but when you're in a bed, that's all the more so. Whatever.
In the story with Yosef, she kicked. Everyone was out of the house. Right. She planned this.
Right.
They were in the same room, and it says that he got so aroused that he released from through his fingernails, whatever that means. A whole other journey of what that means. But the point is, very high state of arousal. That's my argument. It's so bed also brings it to a very high state of arousal. Also, you're saying it's even more than that. I mean, it doesn't say anywhere that he wasn't in the same bed with her.
I'm not saying that.
It says
there was more than Yosef. I'm just saying, in a general case.
Yes, you're saying a bed is more stronger than just being in the same room.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, but if the Gemara tells you that he had 10 drops, come out.
But does it say if he was in the same bed? Maybe he was in the same bed.
It doesn't say in the same bed, but you can imagine whatever. Okay, my point is this: the same bed. What does it do? It brings a man up in terms of arousal, correct? So, if the Gemara is telling me that Yosef already dropped 10 drops of seed, doesn't that basically mean, okay, he's on this level or even beyond it? That's my argument. Okay, fine, let's see. I don't want to get stuck on that point again. Let's see, let's go forward. We're in the commentary of the Maharsha. The Maharsha, page 207. The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin 19b says the following, that the strength of Yosef was the humility of Boaz, and the strength of Boaz was the humility of Palti. Who are these people, Boaz and Palti? Boaz appears in the Tanakh, in the Torah, in the Bible, I should say, in the book of Ruth, okay, Mignat Ruth, and Palti appears in the book of Kings, Melachim. Look at note number 8. Basically, what this Gemara is saying is that Yosef's test was less than Boaz's, and Boaz's test was less than Palti's. Palti had the hardest test. Do I give a background story? Yeah, I'm about to, yeah. This being so, the Maharsha says, why did the captive woman compare her betrothed, meaning the guy she was supposed to marry, to Yosef rather than these two other figures who faced similar tests? Look at number 9, we explain the tests. Boaz's test was that Ruth, who was a convert to Judaism, who wanted to marry Boaz, she laid next to him all night and he did not touch her. Because he didn't fully marry her yet. That was Ruth, chapter 3 over there. Palti, however, who was Palti? He engaged a woman called Michal. Michal was the daughter of King Shaul, the first king of Israel. Michal was his daughter, and the king Shaul, he wanted Michal to marry Palti. Palti, they had an engagement, and he even lived with her, meaning in the same house, but he did not touch her. Why? Because Michal had already previously been engaged to David Melech, which was the eventual second king. Shaul and David had a rivalry. Shaul didn't recognize David's engagement to his daughter, so Shaul forced Palti to marry his daughter. But Palti said, listen, this is a married woman already. He knew David was already married to her. So therefore Palti went along with the king's orders, but he never consummated, which would have been a huge sin, having relations with a married woman. Right? The Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin talks about it there. Famously, Palti thrusted a sword in the bed, in the middle of the bed, between himself and Michal, as a reminder that if I cross over this sword, I'm done. In Olam Haba, meaning sleeping with a married woman. So that's famously what Palti did. So Palti had a much more difficult test, it seems like, because he had social pressure. The king told him to marry his daughter, but at the same time she's married to David. And so but that's a tough situation to be in.
Generally, we always use Yosef as the
right. So the Maharsha's question is why? Why use Yosef? Why not use Palti? He also had a difficult test. Why didn't you compare him to Palti? So Maharsha answers. He says the reason is because that the captive man's test in our Gemara was more difficult than Boaz's only in two aspects. That Ruth was not Boaz's wife, but the captive woman was his wife, right? And the second one is that Boaz was not an everyday. That was Boaz. It was not an everyday occurrence. But with this case of the captives, it was every day. They were in the same room every day. The captors were thinking they were together trying to get kids. So his test was more than. So also the captive boy's test was more difficult than Palti's test, but only in one aspect. What is that? That Michal was not his wife because she was already married to David, but the captive woman was his wife. The captive woman in our Gemara chose Yosef instead to compare because it better emphasizes her point, since her betrothed's test was more difficult than Yosef's test in three aspects, as she listed in the Gemara, which was that Potiphar's wife was not his wife, but the captive girl was his wife, and that Yosef was not an everyday occurrence, but with her it was an everyday occurrence, and that with Yosef they were not in the same bed, but with the captive boy and girl they were in the same bed. So she chose Yosef because there's three reasons why it was harder. By Palti it was only one, and by Boaz is only two. That's the Maharsha's approach. Good. Ben Yehoyada, he says the following: another possibility as to whom the woman said to eulogize her late betrothed that passed away could be the Jews who redeemed her by paying the ransom. So one of the questions was that she said in the story to them, say to them to eulogize. She said to them, eulogize this man because he was so great. Who's the them if she's still a captive? So Ben Yehoyada answers over here. He says it could be that the Jews who ended up redeeming her after ransoming her, buying her back, and along with other Jews that were possibly there, she told the story of her fiance and what he did. So she said to them, eulogize him, spread his story. Okay.
What's the sin if he was with her? They're engaged, they don't have the ketubah, and they were together. What's the sin?
The sin is being with a woman without a ketubah.
Karet?
Not karet, no. No. That's the only sin. It's a rabbinic in nature.
What about these other etos karet?
Which are the ones?
These other examples.
The married woman, Palti, that's definitely very bad. But with Yosef, she was a goya. Technically, there was no. She was a married woman though, and when the Torah does recognize marriages of goyim as well as if they live together, so that would have been a married woman.
Boaz also.
And Boaz, Ruth was not. No, she was a widow. No, that was not Boaz. That was Michal. That was Plati's case. In Boaz's case, Ruth, she was single at the time. She was a widow. She was a widow, yeah. But she was a goya, technically. She was converting. She converted. And it would have been asur to be with a goya, but again, and in those times it was very different because we saw that conversion worked differently then. Definitely worked differently than how the Shulchan Aruch encodes it now. Okay. Ben Yehoyada. Surely he says, it cannot be that the captive man's test was more difficult than Yosef's. So he's trying to defend Yosef over here. Rather, she only said so figuratively in order to prop up the praise that her betrothed nevertheless deserved. Emphasis. But in truth, there are several reasons as to why Yosef's test was surely incomparable to the captive man's test. Firstly, Potiphar's wife dedicatedly, that's a word, dedicatedly, okay, tried to persuade and seduce Yosef to be with her. Whereas in our Gemara's case, she outright requested not to be touched.
Big difference.
It's a big difference already, right? If a beautiful woman, but the sources bring down that Potiphar's wife was one of the most beautiful women ever. If she came along to you and said every day, be with me, trying to get you, that's a lot harder than if a woman who, even if you're married to, she says, don't touch me. It's very different, you know what I mean? It can be a turnoff to a lot of guys. Again, you can argue both sides though, because we'll talk about it later, because some people want more what they can't have.
No.
So I think it depends on the nature of the person. But let's see further over here. Second, in the case of our Gemara, the concept of he has bread in his basket applies. This is what I alluded to. It's a halachic concept that we apply, that we use. Meaning that since he had engaged her already, he knew that it was only a matter of time before he would eventually be able to have legally fulfilled his desire to be with her, once they were redeemed from captivity and were able to write a ketubah and get fully married. So that's called bread in the basket. That means that's the same concept we use in nidah. That's why a person is allowed to be in seclusion with his wife who's in nidah, because it's called bread in the basket. He knows eventually he's going to be able to have her legally, halachically, and therefore we say a person, once he has that in his mind, a person is more at ease and he's able to control himself more. Versus a woman who's completely forbidden to him and she'll never be allowed to him. There's a concept called Mayim Genuvim Mimtako, which is a verse in Mishlei that says, sweetened waters taste sweeter. Stolen waters are sweeter. That a person gets a certain thrill, a certain rush, and desiring something that he's not allowed to have. All right, so that's where that falls in. But here, with this woman, he's engaged to her. You know, he thought maybe Ben Yehoyada is saying that eventually he'll get redeemed. They'll get their lives saved. He'll be able to be with her. Lastly, hold on, number 10. Yeah, I spoke about that in number 10 on the bottom. Lastly, there is the concept of Kol hagadol mechavero yitzro gadol memenu, and this is really the main kicker that puts Yosef over. And the translation is, anyone who is greater than his friend, his yetzer is greater than his. This is a very fundamental concept in self-development, in free will. It's brought down in Masechet Sukkah 52a, and again the concept is that the greater the person, the more refined and higher level of righteousness he is, the greater is his desire to do evil. The greater is his test. It has to be even, right? Your yetzer hara, the one, your enemy who's trying to bring you down always, bring you further from God, he has to grow with you, right? As you grow and get better at keeping God's laws and serving God, he's going to grow and get better at trying to break you. Because otherwise, it's an unfair fight. And it's too easy. And life is not designed to be easy. That battle is supposed to be even your entire life. That's how you have free will. Otherwise, your free will is skewing too much to the good side and it's no more free will anymore. You get it? It's like you earn less credit. Yes.
If he breaks you, brings you down, does he diminish also? Because now you went down.
Yes. He grows with you and he also shrinks with you. So in reverse. So if a person was a big tzaddik and then he went what we call OTD, off the derech, off the right path, and he diminishes, the yetzer hara will also diminish with him as well. To keep it at even fair struggle of morality internally for your whole life.
So those people who constantly fall into the influence of the yetzer hara,
Yes.
constantly.
Yes. Everyone.
Doesn't that imply that the yetzer hara is stronger and they're weaker, or is it
No.
imply that they're just
No.
don't know the laws?
That just implies that he doesn't even realize the abilities that he has to overcome it, and he's not putting the proper steps into doing it. This Gemara over there says famously that in the future God is going to slaughter the yetzer hara. When the Mashiach comes, it's going to be the climax, and the days God is going to slaughter the yetzer hara. And it says everyone's going to be crying. Everyone's going to be crying. Tzaddikim and and Rashaim.
Why?
Why? Because it says for the tzaddikim, when God's going to slaughter the yetzer hara, it's going to appear to them as huge as a mountain, and they're going to cry. They're going to say, "I was able to overcome that." Right? And then by the Rashaim, when his yetzer hara is going to be slaughtered, he's going to look at him. It's going to be a little pipsqueak, little nothing. He's going to look at him. He's going to cry. He's going to say, "I wasn't able to overcome that." Right? The reverse. Because this is the concept. Because the worse you are, the smaller your yetzer hara is. That means you're on that level. And the bigger you are, the bigger your yetzer hara is. That's where you get this concept from. It grows and shrinks with you. It's designed, catered, custom made for you. Because everyone has their own specific tests. For one guy, it could be waiting 6 hours between meat and dairy, the hardest thing in the world. Another guy could be, not watching things he's not supposed to watch, the hardest thing in the world. But for this guy, this is not even a test. What do you mean? He's like, I got past that 10 years ago. This is nothing. I don't have a pull for that anymore. That yetzer hara doesn't affect him. Now there's a new one that affects him, or that grew along with him. It's sort of reversed, because as you grow, I'm digressing, but as you grow in this sense of righteousness and refinement, the yetzer hara is also growing with you, but the tests that you're having in your service of God is the opposite, is much more subtle, the smaller tests. Like, okay, I know the Shulchan Aruch says in this chapter that you're supposed to, take 3 steps back, specifically nose to heel, meaning foot,
Heel to toe.
Heel to toe, like this, right? So if I do have a yetzer hara, I'm kind of lazy to make a kind of big step. I want to make a half a step. Smallest thing. What do you mean, a little tiny detail in the Shulchan Aruch? But in his mind, he's having a huge struggle.
It's a big deal for him.
Right? His yetzer hara is huge, but the tests that are being tested are much more subtle. Whereas this guy, all the way at the other end of the spectrum, he's struggling, like we said, he's struggling just to wake up on time, just to say Kriyat Shema at the last minute. Or he's struggling, like I said, watching things not supposed to watch, or cursing, using bad language. It's a big struggle for him. For this guy, he would never think twice to say a curse, to drop an F-bomb. He would never do that. Doesn't cross his mind. What do you mean? He's like, I'm much better than that. He has no pull for that. He's already much more developed. So you get it? That's what it works. Again, we have a few. This is one of the chapters that we're going to go into that more, about free will and development. But that's the point that Ben Yehuda says. That yet, obviously, Yosef Tzaddik was way up here on that spectrum, and the captive boy was way down here. So how can you compare him to him? Therefore, the yetzer that Yosef battled was much greater than the yetzer that the captive man in our Gemara battled. Potiphar's wife's enticement of Yosef was so cosmic that it was representative of all the dark forces trying to destroy the entire world by making Yosef succumb to that sin. So the weight of the world literally was on Yosef's shoulders. So you cannot make that comparison. That's what Ben Yehuda says. We're going to go into that more and show you more in detail how that's so. How the weight of the world literally was on Yosef's shoulders in that test. But I don't know if we're going to do that today. Maybe next week's session. We have a couple more commentaries, short ones. The Iyun Yaakov says, even though Yosef's test may be considered greater than the captive man's test, in the one aspect that Yosef was being seduced by Potiphar's wife, while the captive man was deterred from touching his betrothed girl, nevertheless the captive man had it harder in 3 other aspects. Number 1, she was his wife. Number 2, they were in the same bed. Number 3, it was every day. So he also defends that the captive man had a harder test. Maharam Shif says, according to the account of the incident between Yosef and Potiphar's wife in Masechet Sotah 36b, we spoke about that there, where it says how Yosef dropped 10 drops of seed through his fingernails. He was so aroused. The woman of our Gemara could have claimed further that Yosef was able to overcome his desires because in that moment he had seen the image of his father Yaakov, whereas the captive man in our Gemara had no such assistance from heaven. Meaning the Gemara says there famously that one thing that helped Yosef hold himself back and not do the sin with Potiphar's wife was that he looked in the mirror, and it was like a reflection somewhere there, a window or a mirror, and he saw his own face reflection, and famously it says that he looked very much the spitting images, as they say, like his father Yaakov. And automatically it was a reminder that my father Yaakov is one of the pillars of the entire world. I'm going to do such a terrible sin right now. It was a reminder for him that helped him. That helped him overcome. Whereas this guy in our Gemara didn't have any help like that, and he still overcame.
How does the woman know what was going on in the guy's head? Maybe he was thinking of something.
Maybe he was thinking about his father.
I don't know, whatever helped him.
She doesn't know. She doesn't, she can't say it's a yes or no. It's something it's an unknown. It's an unknown, that's the point. With Yosef, it was a known. The Gemara tells us that it helped him out. Okay. Enei Kol Chai. This is written by Rabbi Chaim Palaji, very famous Sfori Chacham, wrote many books in the late 1700s and the 1800s. He writes the following: the Gemara in Yomah only means that she would try to persuade Yosef daily, verbally. Yeah. So the Gemara in Yomah said that she would try to seduce him every day. She would try to change her clothing to seduce him morning and night, different clothing. So he explains here, the Enei Kol Chai says that only meant verbally. Verbally she was trying to seduce him. There was only one time though that she was physically grabbed him by the clothes saying, lie with me, be with me. That's what the Torah says right there. And when the Torah talks about that story in Bereshit 39:7, she says, she grabbed him and said, be with me, lie with me. That was the one physical time that she touched him. And that was the test that the girl in our Gemara was referring to, that it was only one time. I mean, we were trying to say it was more than one time, but he's explaining there was only one physical time. Okay. This is the one time that the woman in our Gemara is referring to. Okay. Last one, Yafet Talmud. This is written by Rabbi Rachamim Nisim Yitzchak Palaji. That's the son of Rabbi Rachamim Palaji. He writes the following: Potiphar's wife was only present around Yosef for minimal moments in the morning and in the evening. Here and there, popping in and out. Remember, she was the mistress of the house. She was, she couldn't be around the slave all day, Yosef. Whereas the couple in our Gemara were present with each other all day long. This is how the test was harder than Yosef's. Okay, that's all the commentaries that we looked at. And now, Chatzar Yosef, what do you guys say? You want to do one paragraph? One paragraph? I mean, the first paragraph, I'm just kind of going through everything. And yeah, you know what I'm going to do? One page. Just one page. It's not that long. And then next week, we're going to get into some deep stuff. Bezrat Hashem, about this particular thing. Okay, one page. Page 209. Let us run a short recap through the commentators in our Gemara. The Yun Yaakov and Maharsha maintained that Yosef and Potiphar's wife were not on the same bed. But we have already shown in the Shara Chatzar section, the question section, plenty of evidence suggesting that they were or they might have been on that level. You can agree to disagree. Yun Yaakov and the Maharsha also have no problem saying that Yosef's test was not every day, despite the clear indication otherwise in the verses where it says day to day. The verse itself said day to day. We brought this with the verse itself in the Torah. Yom Yom, or was it? We said it before in the last week. It's on page 206. Right? And also Masechet Yomah speaks about how she changed her clothing for him every day, as we mentioned. and they do not offer any explanations for why they consider it a one-time test versus an everyday test. However, the Enik Chai did offer an approach to this question, suggesting that Potiphar's wife was only tested him physically that one time by grabbing him, while the rest of the days they were just verbal enticement. Okay. This still does not prove that Yosef's test was easier than that of the captive man's in our Gemara, because the captive man was not enticed at all. On the contrary, he was repelled by the captive woman, as the Bein Yehuda points out. Plus, the Enik Chai does not consider the Gemara in Yoma 35b that clearly says that Potiphar's wife also enticed Yosef verbally with multiple provocative outfits per day. So her enticement for those days were not just limited to verbal, there was also visual, right? She dressed up for him. The Efet Talmud offered another answer, but his answer is also insufficient because it does not address all the other factors, especially the major factor that Yosef was enticed daily in multiple ways, while the captive man was not enticed at all. He was repelled by her. To offer a simple approach to answer the question as to how the captive woman could claim that her betrothed's test was more difficult than Yosef's, we begin with the following. Okay, the Bein Yehuda's point that Yosef was enticed by Potiphar's wife continuously, while the captive man was repelled, does not necessarily mean that Yosef's test was more difficult. It is not so straightforward because inherently one wants more that which is restricted to him. This is one argument you can make. This is the classic theme of eating the forbidden fruit, as it were. As it is written, stolen waters are sweetened. Like I said, it's actually Tehillim. I thought it was misled. That's a mistake. It's in Tehillim 9:17. Stolen waters are sweetened. Potiphar's wife, making herself so available to Yosef, may have lessened his desire for her at least slightly. It is quite the opposite for the captive man. Hearing from his betrothed that she did not want him to touch her likely fired up his passion that much more. Furthermore, the second point of the Bein Yehuda, that the captive man considered his betrothed bread in the basket, that he's going to have her eventually, meaning he expected to be able to have her once they were redeemed, it's questionable. Since how could he have known the expectations of the mind of the captive? How could you know that? It could be argued that on the contrary, a captive would live every day like it was his last, since he had no idea what his captors would have in store for him. His life is very unpredictable, and he ended up dying anyway in captivity, as we see. This being so, the thoughts going through his head could have been along the lines of, I may die tomorrow, God forbid. Who cares about a ketubah right now, right? You could have said, let me just have one last, pleasure.
I could die tomorrow, I'm not have time to do teshuvah.
He's a big tzaddik. Okay, fine. Nevertheless, he overcame such thoughts and desires and did not touch her anyway. Like we said, he's a big tzaddik. Commendable indeed. Lastly, it seems the last aspect the woman mentioned in our Gemara was the tipping point and what made his test more difficult than Yosef's test. Namely, that she was technically already his wife. And the only reason that he was not allowed to be intimate with her was because of the rabbinic enactment restricting a groom from being intimate with his wife until a ketubah is drafted. Right? That's only a rabbinic thing. By Yosef, however, his challenge was with a married woman, which is a severe Torah prohibition that applies even to Gentiles, even to Goyim. Right? They have an issue, they're not allowed to do adultery, which means the Torah acknowledges a certain level of marriage amongst the Goyim. What that is, I don't want to get into now. It may be argued that Yosef restrained himself because the consequence of him failing the test was a dire Torah level prohibition of a married woman, making him more reluctant to do so, whereas the captive man restrained himself from being with a woman who was permitted to him on a Torah level and was only forbidden to him due to a rabbinic enactment of writing ketubah, which he had not been able to fulfill yet. And even though he was in a situation where he may have died tomorrow and never had the opportunity to consummate his marriage, he still dug down deep and persevered. So that's us trying to defend this guy, defend the Gemara, defend the girl saying about the guy that he was on a higher level or had a harder test than Yosef. What an ordeal. In all these ways, his test, we could say, was more difficult than Yosef's test. And then there's a whole thing in note 5, which is a very complicated Gemara digression. I don't want to get into that here in the video. For those who are into Gemara, we have a connection to Masechet Sotah 7a, how we defend what we wanted to say over there. It's kind of a long thing. I'm not going to get into that now. So, on a simple level, we defended it. But we're considering the event of Yosef and Potiphar's wife on the deeper scale, and understanding what actually happened between Yosef and Potiphar and what was on the shoulders of Yosef in that particular incident. it becomes apparent that there is something outstanding here which cannot be overlooked, right? This being the sheer magnitude of that event. And we don't have the time now, but next week, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to explain the sheer magnitude of how cosmic it was for Yosef to overcome Potiphar's wife. And then the question resurfaces, if that's so, how could you say that he was better than Yosef? So B'ezrat Hashem, next week, we're going to answer that. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen, Amen.